Following breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ as the NFL continues to deal with a COVID outbreak in the Cleveland Browns organization as well as in other teams across the league. As a result, Saturday's game between the Las Vegas Raiders and the Cleveland Browns has been moved to Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, the Browns had 20 positive tests, including 11 starters, among them starting quarterback Baker Mayfield, wide receiver Jarvis Landry, backup quarterback Case Keenum also testing positive, and a number of defensive players as well. Now, along with that contest, Sunday's game between Washington and Philadelphia, as well as the game between the Seahawks and Rams, those games have been moved to Tuesday. That is according to our Jonathan Jones. Speaking of our senior NFL writer, he joins us now to discuss this. Jonathan, obviously, you know, the COVID outbreak, things happening very quickly in the National Football League. Roger Goodell was saying they weren't considering postponements. Now they have moved at least 3 games. I mean, what's your reaction to this move by the National Football League to kind of push things back a bit?
Yeah, not a surprise at all. And what really had to be the call that the NFL made, and that became clear as early as last night, as 3 teams, the Rams, the Washington football team, and the Cleveland Browns, each had at least 20 player positives. And, you know, Jeremy, this is the sort of cognitive dissonance that's going on here, is that the league created their protocols and they have adapted and they have adjusted their protocols as best they can to adjust to a novel emerging virus. And there's a lot of folks who are pointing right now to the July memo that was sent out to all clubs stating that, hey, if there's an outbreak among your unvaccinated player group, that we're not going to move the game and you're going to have to forfeit and nobody gets paid. And everyone right now is talking about that. That was a July memo. That was before this new variant that is very clearly, according to all health experts, much more transmissible than the virus that we were dealing with back in July. That was when the vaccination rate was hovering around 80% or so, and many teams were not meeting a high threshold for their player participation pool to get vaccinated. Right now, we're at a 95% or so vaccination rate. The virus has changed and adjusted, and the league has to adjust alongside with it. And if these players, and listen, I understand that it is not convenient for these players who have prepared this week to play on a certain day, and certainly not convenient for a team that does not have a COVID outbreak right now to adjust their schedule, even though we saw it multiple times last year with multiple different teams. We've been through this, so how quickly we forget. I understand that it doesn't seem fair, but if you don't play the game, you're not going to get paid for the game. And so, you know, you'll win 2-0 and you'll get the win on the record, but you won't get paid. So it's one of those, what do you want to happen? And right now the league is faced with so many player positives among 3 teams that they don't know how to isolate and control the spread of the virus. Jadeveon Clowney just reportedly tested positive earlier today. There is clearly spread going on within the Cleveland Browns, and you know, it's not vaccinated or unvaccinated at this point. The virus has changed, and the league and the union have to change with it. That's what they're attempting to do right now by moving these games to buy some time to work out these new protocols that they just put in place less than 24 hours ago.
And Sean Payton, we had you on earlier discussing that. The New Orleans Saints coach will not be part of their game this weekend because he has tested positive for COVID. So, JJ, I mean, when you look at this situation right now, we're dealing with multiple players testing, over 100 players in the National Football League testing positive for COVID and counting as it continues to go up. I mean, it seems hour by hour is what we're looking at right now in terms of positive tests coming out. But, I mean, is this going to be, as we finish off this last month of the season, I don't want to say limp to the finish, but a situation where it's going to be fluid week after week as they continue to deal and try to get a handle on how to deal with this variant and COVID?
I think it's going to be fluid hour to hour right now. I think that the league and the union are trying to get their hands around what these protocols need to be for what this virus is today. Again, according to health experts, it is a much more transmissible virus than the previous variants. However, it also appears to be a much less severe variant, thank goodness, than the previous variants that we had dealt with here in this country and around the world. And so because of that, what the league and the union have been trying to do is put together protocols on the fly, but based in science, that allows them to have asymptomatic players test out of the protocol and return to play sooner than that 10-day window had allowed earlier. And so what they're looking at is genomic sequencing and how much viral load a certain player has. And so, hey, maybe they tested positive in previous tests before, and under the old protocols, well, you'd have to get negative tests within 24 hours of one another before returning to play. Well, now that threshold has sort of gone up a little bit, where you might have a little bit of COVID-19 in you, but it's not going to be transmitted on the field. That the league and the union and their medical doctors that they have been consulting with, that they have determined that you are safe both for yourself to play football and safe to play with your teammates and safe to play against an opponent, that you can go out there. You don't have to wait the 10 days with the 2 negative tests within 24 hours. We're going to see how that plays out. Again, that was just installed less than 24 hours ago. And so obviously the league, and certainly obviously the Browns, the Washington football team, the Rams, are all hopeful that they will be able to get a portion of their players to test out of the protocol or test in, whatever sort of phrase you want to say there, so that they can return to play. We're going to see how that's going to work. But right now, again, the biggest thing was for the league to make it to the point where they could have a competitive game. You have these teams with 20 to 25 players who can't play. That's almost half the roster. And you can have a practice squad of 10 to 15 guys, and you can elevate them. And they're not going to postpone games because there is a position catastrophe, like we saw with the Denver Broncos last year when they skirted the rules and got caught by skirting the rules. When you had the San Francisco 49ers facing the Green Bay Packers and they had an issue at wide receiver. It's not that anymore. It's that we had these rules for a COVID outbreak, but now the outbreaks, we're having daily records every day now. We're seeing this in ways that we haven't seen in the previous 20 months of being in this pandemic. And so the thought in some NFL circles that, well, push through because what you wrote in a memo in July, well, you better hold on to that. It's ridiculous and it's absurd. And I know I'm a little bit on a soapbox here, but we're all in this together, right? That's what we've been saying for since March of 2020. We're all in this together, so you have to adapt. And finally, Jeremy, the last thing that I'll say about this point is, yes, it appears right now on the schedule that if you move a game to Monday or Tuesday, that one of these teams or multiple of these teams, well, then they play on Saturday. And so now they're going to have a short week and be at a disadvantaged position. All I would say is hold tight to that, because the NFL is trying to figure out how to get through this week. They're not wanting to add a week 19. That is an option that really shouldn't even be on the table, and it's probably an option that, while it may be in the back of people's minds in the league office, no one is saying that out loud right now. And so they just want to get through this week, and they'll figure out next week when next week comes.
Okay, so we have confirmed that both of the games on Tuesday are going to be played at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Sorry, that was just coming in, JJ, as you were finishing up there. But I wanted to ask you, how far away are we? I asked Josina this question. I'll ask the same to you. How far are we away from the NFL instituting, going back to what we saw last season and having daily COVID testing, whether you're vaccinated or not?
As recently as 22 hours ago, a source that I spoke with said that it was extremely unlikely that we were going to see daily testing. I asked the question to Alan Sills, the chief medical doctor of the NFL, just a couple of days ago at the league meeting in Irving, Texas. And he said the NFL was not all that interested in doing daily testing, that testing is not going to prevent transmission, and that the league, at least their stance is, that they want to do all that they can to prevent transmission. Now, last year it was, hey, let's identify and isolate the virus, and that's why we had daily testing. We've heard from Buccaneers head coach Bruce Arians, who said that he thinks that asymptomatic players should be able to play. We've heard from a number of folks around the league, certainly on the record, but I've heard it plenty off the record as well, that they don't need daily testing, that if there are symptoms that show up, okay, go get tested, and if you're positive and sick, whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, you shouldn't be allowed to play. But if you are vaccinated And if you are asymptomatic, there is a strong feeling within many NFL teams and within league circles that you should be able to play that football game. So it's a matter of player health and safety, of course. You don't want to spread it within the team facility. You don't want to spread it on the football field. But if these guys can be safe for themselves and be safe with one another in this novel and emerging virus that we're still learning more about, then there is a strong belief in league circles that these games can be played.
And it's only been here for a couple of weeks, this version of the virus, and already having a major impact on the sports world, not just here in North America, but globally as well. Senior NFL writer Jonathan Jones joining us to discuss. JJ, good to see you. Thank you for hopping on with us and giving us the latest on this situation. Of course, the start of that is the fact that the Raiders and Browns game has been moved from Saturday to Monday. That game will now be played at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be followed by the regularly scheduled Monday night game between the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears. Now, the Washington-Philadelphia game, along with the Seahawks and Rams, those four teams dealing with various COVID outbreaks, those games have been moved to Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to take a quick break here again on CBS Sports HQ, but we have more to discuss. Our Pete Prisco will join us on the other side as the NFL continues to deal with the COVID outbreak.